Okay, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Genoa Township Zoning Commission. The date is December 13th, 2021. The time is 7 p.m. The agenda for tonight is, the first item is Romanelli and Hughes' second meeting for the Grove. Second item is the zoning text amendment. It's the second meeting for that. And then zoning commission rules of procedure. Staff present is Joe Schaefer and Paul Benson. Joe, can you call to order?
Certainly. Mr. Moore?
Present.
Mr. Leff? Mr. Antonetts?
Here.
Ms. Walsh?
Present.
Mr. Welch?
Here.
And I'll note Mr. Welty and Mr. Bishop are both here as well as alternates.
Awesome, thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the meeting of November 8th, 2021. We got any comments, questions, concerns? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the November 8th, 2021 meeting minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
Oh,
Roll call, Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Leff?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Welch? Yes. Mr. Antonetts?
yes. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda, at 7:02. Romanelli and Hughes Building Company requesting approval of a final development plan to construct 30 lots on approximately 19.849 acres at 5481 Worthington Road, Westerville 43082, parcel number 31723003001000, a vacant lot currently zoned planned residential development, also known as the Grove, ZC case number 2021-05, continued from the November 8th, 2021 meeting. At this point, I'll ask anybody who's anticipating to speak on behalf of this part of the agenda, please be sworn in. Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, so since there were only 3 members at the last meeting, I just want to go on the record and make this statement. It was noted that only Mr. Leff, Mr. Welsh, and Mr. Weldy were in attendance at the prior November 8th, 2021 meeting regarding, excuse me, the public hearing for the subject application. The commission discussed staff's recommendation regarding that the 3 individuals who were present at the first meeting should continue to sit as voting members, and that in order to establish a full 5-member board, 2 additional members who were not present on November 8th may also sit as voting members so long as they testify on the record this evening that they have familiarized themselves with the materials and testimony presenting during the prior meeting. So I'll start by saying I did listen to the entire meeting. I did review the entire application. And I also was here for the preliminary development plan and the rezone, so for that reason, I'm going to remain participate.
Okay.
So any of the others, Charles, Sarah?
I did also.
You did also?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I
So you're-
listened to it after the meeting, and I listened to it again today.
Charles?
I will be glad to redact myself.
Okay.
I'm going to flip a sword.
Okay.
Temporarily, I guess Mr. Welty can, actually, do you want to, maybe you could just pass your microphone down to him, then you don't have to change seats if you don't want to.
Well, also, he should attest to whether he's prepared to, because you were here at the last meeting.
He was at the last
Okay.
meeting.
He was here,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So, Mr. Welty, do you prefer you sit up there, or?
No.
Okay. Just steal the microphone. There we go. That works.
Okay.
So Mr. Welty will sit in as the voting member in lieu of Mr. Moore, is that correct? Perfect.
Following exhibits were added or amended. Exhibit D, revised application and plans received November 15th. Exhibit I, staff technical review dated December 3rd. J, staff memo dated December 3rd of this year. K, all public comments received between September 23rd and December 13th of this year. Joe, do you have a staff report?
I do. Obviously, I did the big full-length presentation at the last meeting, so I'm just going to concentrate really on the changes as I typically do when we get into these second meetings. So I know we have other items on the agenda, so I will try to make this really quick. I'm just going to sort of jump through just the red items in the memorandum there, just to hit on the highlights. So in regards to the changes, Staff had previously been asking for utility letters that had been provided during the rezone be included in this submission. Those have been provided. I had asked for exact counts on the proposed number of trees on the property so I could more easily verify compliance. Those numbers have been provided, and I've verified the math on those. I asked for species heights and caliper information and species types, I should say, I'm sorry, heights and caliper information be provided. They did provide those. There was just one error. The evergreen trees on one of the pages says they're going to be 5 feet. They need to be 5.5 feet. So that's a very minor housekeeping item the applicant will have to just clean up. We asked for design details and information pertaining to the proposed 3-rail fence near the plant's entrance on Big Walnut Road. Those have been provided and demonstrate compliance. The applicant's representative spoke at length to the stormwater and drainage design plans during the November 8th meeting. Engineering plans, subject to final approval by the county, have been incorporated into the submission for reference purposes. I'll let the commission, I think, go through any outstanding questions they may still have on those items. I asked for proof that the site qualifies for the signage bonuses that were being claimed. That proof has been provided in the application materials to staff's satisfaction. Lighting on the site would be limited to the proposed entrance feature and coach lights in front of each unit per the prior rezoning and preliminary development plan approvals, as well as to some lighting for the proposed mail kiosk. Design details for each fixture have now been provided, so we have those. So really, as far as the outstanding comments in the tech review, I think there was maybe only 3 or 4. Really, the height of the evergreen trees needs to be corrected, which is a very minor issue. And then under the divergence review, there was just some text type of corrections for clarification purposes and accuracy purposes that need to just be made in regards to how the divergences are being presented in the materials. They're essentially the divergences that were granted during the rezoning, so I'm just trying to make it clear that, number one, those divergences were already granted, and that this isn't re-requesting those divergences, and number two, that they're not requesting any additional divergences under this application. So more just dotting i's, crossing t's for the sake of a permanent record type of thing. And then I have a verbiage change that I wanted to see in regards to the divergence item on page 17, just to eliminate confusion. So those are really the outstanding comments. Frankly, staff is to the point where if the commission was comfortable putting forth a vote, in the past, we've established some of these cleanup items as just conditions prior to board approval, and then sometimes what the trustees end up doing is, if it still doesn't get fixed, it's just a condition of, hey, you need to fix this for staff before they issue you a zoning permit. So I don't see any, what I would consider substantial, major, significant, outstanding compliance issues with the plan at this point. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I too had a chance to review
Your name.
Joe's comments. Joe Luby with the MH&T, and Jim Olin is with me as well from Rumen Elling Hughes. So, and I'm on the same page as Joe. We boiled it down to 4 things. We need to make a statement that the proposed evergreens will be no smaller than 5.5 feet tall. We say that in a couple of places, but there's one place where it says 5. We'll change that. There was a comment about specifically stating that we've got some encroachments allowed, for eaves and awnings and things like that, that we specifically state that we do not allow any encroachments into the open space, right? We'll agree to that. And then the text edits, most of the text edits are changing it from a present tense to a past tense because it was preliminary development plan to follow along. We'll do that in 3 places, and then remove the text on page 17 that it refers to. So we'll agree to all those things. I don't think we have anything else, do you? No?
Nothing further? Okay, at this point, we'll open it up to public comment. Anybody wants to come up and speak to this application? You know our policy is we don't use a timer, just be respectful, keep it brief, state your position and your concerns. Come on up.
It's been a while since I've been to one of these meetings.
Name and address.
Harold Schrock, 7530 Dusty Pines Drive. I remember seeing this about a year ago. Not real good on the time, and I made a comment at the time And someone said that they would look into it, but I haven't heard back, and I certainly don't see it here. That this project is completely cut off from the areas around it. At the time, I suggested a connection. Right here, from here, over, so you can get in there with bicycles. I see no, I'm not sure this is a bicycle path right there, or not, but I don't see any way to tie in across here to get in. Okay. I don't see a way to get in here with a bicycle other than riding down the road.
That it?
Walking or bicycling,
I think-
skateboarding, whatever. I really think that, that the township needs to take into account access, not just to cars, but to all modes of transportation. That's one of the things that we've been discussing for quite a long time. I thought I'd see it there, even at the bottom.
We need you to speak into a microphone so it can be recorded.
Even at the bottom, I see an opportunity for a path to come down through here, maybe from this corner down through there to connect with another development there. Anyway, I don't see it there.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? You two, applicant Joe and Joe Show? You guys want to address this? Potential for pedestrian,
Yeah,
bicycle? I know we have an easement
correct.
granted on the perimeter to allow for a future
Correct.
bike path, walking path.
Correct. So not only did we allocate, it's a 15-foot easement along Worthington Road and Big Walnut Road, but we just made sure that, the landscaping is pulled back and the mounting and everything's tied in. So that corridor is ready to go at such time when the path wants to be extended. And frankly, it's not the type of development we want to make these connections to the perimeter neighborhoods. They're not interested in it. It's a private street development. We're under the allowable for one access point. And we've got quite a bit of sidewalks throughout the whole neighborhood, so that's our answer.
So, speaking from the code standpoint, the code basically says when there is something connect to on the adjacent properties, they do have to build those segments. However, in this instance, on neither end is it adjacent to any existing trail or sidewalk network. So what the code says in that instance, the applicant may opt to instead provide the easements instead of, they can either build the trail, which would be a little trail segment to nowhere at both ends, or they can provide us the easement knowing that at some point now we've at least secured the land. If we ever go in and want to build it, we know we don't have to negotiate with the HOA down the line, that we've already secured the easement during the development and platting process, which is a lot of times one of the harder things to do when you're trying to build these trails. So that's the theory, because otherwise you run into a scenario where if they build it along their frontage, it's going to end and just stop at neighboring properties, and you're going to dump bicyclists and pedestrians off, and where are they going to go from there? So it's always been a chicken and the egg thing with sidewalks and bike trails of exactly the timing. Do you build them to nowhere and they may look silly for 5, 10, 20 years, or do you just sort of acquire the land and knowing that eventually you're going to have to build it on your dime, but then you can build a more comprehensive system? And then to the south, there's a lot of environmental, addition to it sounds like the lack of support possibly by the neighbors. There's a lot of those environmental issues that we're all well aware of in terms of the drainage and the wetlands and whatnot going on through there.
Okay, and I think the distinction that should be made is, like Mr. Luby said, this actually is one parcel owned, privately owned. These aren't public streets. So you'd be actually opening up your property to the public to walk through it. So I'm sure that's a big part of their decision making. I don't know if that helps you explain the potential is for a path, but it's going to be on the perimeter of it. I agree. You want to come up?
Oh, I'm Kathy Davis, 5200 Tussock Street. I just have a bad memory. Do we now have 3 lanes on Big Walnut where that entrance to the property is?
Yeah, I think there's a turn lane, right?
It's all existing, yeah.
There's 3 lanes. Okay. I just forgot if it went that far back. Okay, thank you.
I think we're going to try to pull it up here in the aerial. If the computer cooperates. Yeah, there's a center lane there.
Commonly
It's sort of
called
hard to see with the line.
Suicide lane is what they sometimes refer to it.
And we have been through the county and we've given them traffic projections and in their opinion, there's no additional improvements required, warranted for this development on Big Walnut.
Okay, any other public comment? If not, commission discussion? I'm sorry.
I do have one thought, though. It's sort of a blind corner coming around Big Walnut there if people are exiting into the right-hand lane. And there might be a thought just to check whether a sign showing that, that there's a road now, like on the right-hand side, as they're coming down Big Walnut, to show that there's an entrance to a road, even though it's a private road. Just to warn people coming, because we come 50 miles an hour, even though it's 45. We come 50 miles an hour around that blind curve of Big Walnut. It just might be a thought, because people aren't expecting a road there, you know?
Right, thank you. In discussion, I got a couple questions.
Sir.
So I did listen to the last meeting, and I know there were some issues brought up. I have some questions since I wasn't able to ask. One is regarding traffic. I noticed you, consultant, wrote a letter to Lowe. Did he reply? I didn't see a reply from the county regarding traffic. I saw a letter telling him, but did he reply to your letter
Oh, yeah, as far as.
conferring that
The requirement.
no improvements were needed?
Correct, right. No improvements were needed based on the ADT peak hour. I also add, as part of that discussion, we do site distance exhibits based on survey data, and there's criteria that has to be met or that's not gonna happen. And then we met all that criteria.
Right.
So that has been looked at as well. I know it looks suspicious, like there's a curve right there, but if you actually, and we may have included that, I don't recall, but we do meet the site distance criteria for this entrance.
Okay. I think I had lighting, but I think we've addressed site lighting. There really isn't any site lighting to speak of.
No, just the coach lights and the signage, I
Correct. We
believe.
do not have street lights. We have the coach light, and then there's some lights on the signage,
On
and then
the
we
mail
added a
kiosk.
light at the kiosk.
Well, yeah.
That was part,
At
if
the
I
mill.
may jump in on your question. That was my question. One of the neighbors was concerned about the entrance lighting that may cause a glare on the homes across the street. Was that addressed?
Jim can talk to that.
Jim Olin with Romeo Hughes, 148 West Rock Road. I met with 2 neighbors across the street, and the entrance is not where they thought it was.
Okay,
So
great.
we resolved that.
Thank you so much.
Here. My other question was regarding your sanitary and storm discharge locations going on to the adjacent property. I didn't see your utility letters, but I assume you've gotten confirmation that this is.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There's been a lot of discussion on that. And just so you guys know, we are pretty far along with our final engineering with the county. And we had to jump through quite a few hoops to get to the final. We're almost there. We don't have signed plans yet, but we're really close. We have signed water, signed sanitary, but storm. And we talked about at the last meeting, we had to do some additional survey and had some other things to mitigate some of the downstream issues. That has all been talked extensively and planned. It's all there.
Right,
It's been a
so
lot of
I
work.
remember at the preliminary plan,
Yes,
majority of the discussion was about the downstream neighbors.
yep, from the very beginning.
And which brings up another question I had is part of the submitting this final development plan is a grading plan, but I didn't see a grading plan anywhere to speak of. And my question is, I'm sure that your plan will comply with the Delaware County stormwater regulations, which prohibit you from adversely impacting your neighbors. But the matter is, this still, a large portion of this property already naturally drains onto the neighbors? Have you had any discussion with them about
Oh, yeah.
helping them with that, or what are you going to have preventative measures?
Yep, yep. There's been some effort on Roman Owing Hughes to help them with, they've had some bank stability issues with their existing pond, and they're taking care of that. The two parties have come to an agreement there. And then really the biggest issue, not to get too technical, but it's the major routing. So, you know, a minor storm, a 5-year storm, a 10-year storm, water goes where it's supposed to go, it's not a big problem. It's the major storm events where your system pretty much shuts down and it has to route. And it was supposed to kind of route this direction, but it was kind of routing this direction. And everybody thinks that, you know, the world's coming to an end because it's flooding, but really the water was going down the streets and things. That's all been fixed. So there's easements in place now, and there's some little bit of mounding that was done to force the water to take the path that it was originally designed to take.
The design is in place. In other words, the problem that exists today, as part of our approvals, we were required to design a fix. As part of our approvals, we were required to design a fix. So the design is in place right now. It's not implemented, but it will be when we do our subdivision.
Okay, so I'm going to have to take your word for it because it's not in these documents. And since there are no, that doesn't help me.
Well, you were saying grading plan, so I just was looking for the title.
Yeah.
But maybe that's not the drawing you're looking for.
And I'm assuming that since there are none of the neighbors to the south of you, that you've met all their concerns, or they would be here screaming and hollering?
I brought the entire set, the 28-sheet set, that all the information you'd ever want to know is on the table for approval. And you can see what Jim is talking about, what I'm talking about. Actually had some excerpts of this at the presentation at the last meeting and showed pictures of these drawings that show what I'm talking about. We kind of went over it. So I've got all this stuff here. You don't have to take my word for it. I can show you these drawings.
I'm not going to do
These
that
are
right
pending.
now. Maybe later we
Okay.
can get together. I trust your reputation is you're going to do the right thing.
We wouldn't be this far if we hadn't engaged the neighbors, worked with them, got the county, engaged the county and met all the criteria. And that all happened, yep.
And it happened with the neighbors who are having the issue with the retention pond?
Say that
We're
again?
It happened to the neighbors that are worried about the water going into the retention area? That was the meeting that you said they are going to handle that? Is that?
Yeah, there was multiple meetings, and just to clarify your terms, all of our stormwater that is part of our project is going to be detained on our property in our proposed basin, and then it gets released. So we're not using their
Okay,
retention for anything.
okay, thank you, that's what I wanted to get to.
Okay,
Thank you.
You look clarification because all of it that is not really accurate. Because there's some of it that's naturally runoff going to the south before it gets to your pond. It can't get to your pond. Like this whole area down here, the south is lower than your pond.
But that area, it doesn't require detention. It's not on an impervious surface. It's not, you know, on
No, I
a
get
street,
it,
on
I
a
get it.
roof or anything like that.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
Just want everybody else to understand that you're taking your development is going into the pond. What's
Correct.
naturally flowing down there, you're not deterring it to your pond. Right?
that's correct.
Okay. Any other?
My three questions were answered.
From a discussion standpoint, what do you want verbiage-wise as agreement? Do you want to say that the technical review is agreed to by Mr. Luby in discussion? Do you want specifics? What do you want?
Yeah, if we really want to make it, if you're looking for the comment numbers, you could always say, it's development review comment number 5, and then divergence review comments number 2 and 3 are the items that I flagged as needing to still be addressed, and then, you know, whether your recommendation is that that be addressed prior to the board approving it, or your recommendation be that prior to issuance of the first zoning permit for the development, or prior to them plating, or, I don't, probably not plating, that's probably not a good carrot, but sort of up to the commission to, I think, determine, knowing that the board will review it and they could change that.
Potential for the board to review this is the mid-January, end of January.
Yeah, my guess is because, you know, we'll have a changeover, obviously, in the board, a new board. My guess is I probably won't be able to get in front of them and schedule a hearing for the trustees until January, yeah, which probably means late January or February that they're hearing. So usually the applicant has to submit new copies for the board anyway, and at that time, they usually clean up those types of things.
So by the board review, you'll have the cleanup taken care of?
I'm sorry, say that
By
again.
the board review, you'll have the cleanup, the remaining items taken care of?
Yes.
And then just to clarify, Mr. Luby mentioned an encroachment issue. There's really not an issue, it's just, I had flagged that the way that their text was written, that they were going to allow something that I'm not sure they intended to allow, so I just put them on record, just so you know, the way I'm reading this is, you're not expressly prohibiting some of these items, so staff is going to assume they're permitted unless you, as part of your covenants, don't permit them. So I don't necessarily need it changed, I can enforce it as written, I was just sort of more of a heads up to them that, make sure that is written the way that they
So
want it.
development review number 5 and tech review 2 and 3.
Yep, correct.
Any other comments before we make a motion? All right, good. Mr. Chair, I move to recommend approval of the following to the Genoa Township Board of Trustees. The subject final development plan application, including all plans and materials submitted by Romanelli and Hughes Building Company to construct 30 single-family dwellings on approximately 19.849 acres of property located at 5481 Worthington Road. Westville, Ohio, 43082. Parcel number 317-230-0300100. Currently is zoned Planned Residential Development, PRD, also known as the Grove, zoning case number 2021-05, incorporating exhibits A through K, and comments made by the applicant during the hearing, including development plan revision comment number 5, technical review comments 2 and 3. Both will be resubmitted prior to the Board of Trustee review. I further move to incorporate the following divergences previously approved on December 28th, 2020, zoning case 2020-04 from the Genoa Township zoning resolution into this approval. Number 1, divergence from section 903.01 to reduce the minimum lot size for a planned residential development from 25 acres to approximately 19.849 acres, approximately 17.266 acres after the right-of-way dedication, noting that the revised final development acreage is now documented as being approximately 19.925 acres, approximately 17.248 after right-of-way dedication. Number 2, divergence from section 903.03.A.4 to reduce the required 170, that's 170 feet of open space from the right-of-way of an arterial street to 145 feet from the future right-of-way line of Worthington Road and 150 feet from the future right-of-way of Big Walnut Road. Number 3, divergence from section 903.10.A.1 to allow a sidewalk on only one side of certain portions of the proposed street as illustrated on the plans. Number 4, divergence from section 1608.04 to allow window wells to encroach 4 feet into a side yard setback as long as opposing window wells will be no closer than 3 feet apart. Number 5, divergence to allow the final development plan application for this parcel to be regulated by the zoning resolution that was in effect on September 3rd, 2020, and not be subject to any possible amendments that are made to the zoning resolution from September 3rd, 2020 to date of final development plan application submission.
Okay, we got a motion. Any discussion? Have a second?
Second that, Mr. Chair.
Joe?
Roll call, Mr. Leff.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Mr. Welty. Mr. Antonetts.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You want your binder back?
I
Yeah.
mean, you're gonna need it for the board, right?
I'd love to have them
Yeah,
back,
you're
guys.
gonna,
I would love to have
yeah,
them
then
back.
you don't have to rebuild them.
Your grading plan wasn't in my packet. All I got was a utility plan.
Oh, my game plan was there.
That's why, yeah, that's why I said that. That's all right.
This right? I get it.
You got it?
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda. The time is 7:31. Genoa Township trustees initiated zoning text and map amendment ZC 2021-04 to create a Hoover Watershed Overlay District, Article 7, along with minimal amendments to current articles related to the creation of said district and zoning administration. This is continued from our meeting of October 12th, 2021. At this time, again, I'll ask anyone that would like to comment, ask questions, to please be sworn in. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. For the record, the following exhibits were added or amended. Exhibit G, staff memorandum dated December 6, 2021. Exhibit H, public comments received between September 2nd, 2021 and December 13th, 2021. Joe, you have a staff report?
I don't have an updated report since we haven't changed anything. I'll just give a brief update to the commission, just so you know what we've done since the October meeting. So if you recall, at the October meeting, we had a really good discussion about some of the contents and then some of the concerns. We almost had very little, if any, public at that meeting. So there was some concerns about advertising and getting the word out there. We did talk about mailers. I think I updated you all that when I talked to the board and they just weren't ready to authorize, they authorized that expenditure. They didn't authorize it. They weren't ready to do that yet. They wanted us to try to use some of the existing communication channels we had first. So I worked with Communications Director Leslie Strader to do social media posts. We did constant contact email blast. We set up a web page where we were directing a lot of people to that had more information, which contained the text, the map, the USGS map, the memo that I presented to you back in October, as well as a sort of a 2-page FAQ that took that memorandum and tried to boil it down into something that was a little easier to read for people. As you could tell, over the last several days, we've received a lot of public comments via email. I've forwarded them all to you, even up to the last 2 minutes before the meeting. I just sent you another one that I got late today. You can see we have some more people in the crowd than we did at the October meeting, so I'd say those efforts have paid off in regards to getting awareness out there and getting commentary back. So how we move forward is really up to the commission at this point. Obviously, I'm sure there's people here who would like to get their thoughts and comments on the record, so I don't want to eat into any more of their time. There was some recurring themes and questions and possibly some misunderstandings I noticed in the public comment, but maybe it's better we get the commentary first, and then the board can ask me for any clarifications or questions that you may have.
I agree.
Question, Mr. Chairman. Joe, do you believe that, other than the mailer, you've exhausted all of the normal courses of communication to get public comment at this stage?
I mean, we could always send out more social media posts and send out more emails. I know some of the residents did, I think, probably shared it amongst their group, so I think the word did definitely get out there. Now, did we get every house within the watershed? I don't know, probably not. But absent of doing the mailer, if this hearing were to get continued tonight, I have Leslie on standby. She's like ready to send out that newsletter that it's supposed to hit like in early January. We were basically waiting to see what happened tonight, because if she knows the date, if I can give her the date of what happens tonight, if this gets continued, then she can also get it out in the newsletter. So I guess to answer that question, we could utilize the newsletter, but it was all dependent on the direction the conversation took tonight.
So what resources did we use?
Nextdoor and Facebook, which are the social media platforms, and then I sent out a constant contact email blast on it.
The language itself, was it posted on the website? Or
Yes, yeah, so all the advertising we did, for the sake of brevity, we just said, for more information, go to genoatwp.com/Hoover, and it was on that page that we posted the actual text, the actual map, and all that stuff.
All right,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
any other, before we go to public comment? Okay, I'll repeat, we don't have a timer, just be respectful. We want to hear, obviously, we want to hear what you had to say. You live in this community with us, so if you want to come up and give us some of your wisdom, now's your chance.
Jim Carter, 4493 South Old 3C Highway. Mr. Lubinsky, you probably got this letter later, I think I just got it. Some of the things that he suggested were more administrative concerning this overlay. It eliminates the zoning commission's approval. Rezone plots cannot be referendumed. It's difficult to amend or change overlay in the future. He wanted to support the 2016 comp plan where the densities were before in the planning areas. He was not happy with the harmonization that eliminated lower density from 0.75 to 2.2. I also sent you a letter. Hopefully you got that too. I'll kind of go over the basics here. As written, I don't believe the Hoover watershed overlay achieves its stated goals. It seems, and there's several things, I'm not sure of all of them. It's a fairly complex document, and there's a lot of things that play off of this that are really, what's going to happen down the road. It seems the setbacks for the lots abut the city of Columbus land that abuts Hoover Reservoir the same as before. It was 100 feet before, now it has 250-foot ones. That appears that way to me. There's different than the type of plantings, but I'm not sure replacing trees required around a PRD with the same number of native shrubs and filtering grasses works completely. I think there should be more moundings, higher number of grasses, appropriate drainage allows the water to filter before it goes into Hoover. The most obvious problem with the overlay is it allows 1.65 density throughout the entire overlay area. In the 2016 Genoa Township Comprehensive Plan was voted by the trustees to maintain 0.75. We know about the harmonization and all that. The 1.65 density is completely against the proposed Article 701. The fact that the density in the township was raised to 2.2 and is now being lowered to 1.65 is not a win for the residents. It's as if someone took half your land and gave you a quarter back and said, are you happy with that? Is that a good deal? It's not a good deal. We had 0.75. The zoning commission and trustees worked with it, but then it was blown out. It's as if we have 4.65 condos in planning area 2. Are we going to set that as our standard? The first VINMAR actual technical density, I believe, was around 0.9 because they traded with other subdivisions. In other words, they made them a little less dense to allow them to go in there. The second one was based off of that. There wasn't a trade-off, but that was what that was based off. And then with residents working together with Mr. Romanelli and Hughes, the new VINMAR reserve is 1.14. If you've had a chance to drive through there, it's beautiful. The homes sell really well. They're building more houses there than about any place else. So we can allow people to build at 1.4 and they'll do just fine. I'd recommend setting a target about 1.0 as we go forward. The problem with as this is written, right off the bat with the intentions and purpose, it says to eliminate traffic congestion and overdevelopment. It doesn't do that. It says create opportunities for the public to access, study, and enjoy Hoover Reservoir. Genoa Township doesn't actually own the land around Hoover Reservoir. The city does, unless erosion has evolved it back, and most of those are private properties, which Genoa Township is not going to be able to go through to allow access. Interconnected greenways and waterways, I don't believe there are any of those. It says preserve the remaining agricultural, forested, and undeveloped lands. 1.65 density is not going to do that. It says retain, establish view sheds, retain and or establish view sheds, vista, night sky visibility, rural character, protected open space. 1.65 density is not going to do that. Restrict land uses. It says enhance the area's more passive bucolic ambience. It's not going to do that. The way this is laid out does not accomplish the purpose. We talked about, I don't think we can actually access it. It really nullifies all the intentions and purposes that are written in here. So even if we were going to do this, and I don't think it's a good idea whatsoever, we need to change the intent and purposes or change the matter of the entire proposal, because even though it sounds great, a Hoover overlay, we're going to protect this, it affects all the lands within. What we had before, planning areas were great. I believe the planning areas in the future could be put into the zoning resolution and back, to something reasonable, very close to what we were before. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
I noticed you were saying, oh, I'm sorry, Kathy Davis, 5200 Tussock Street. I noticed in what you, Joe, were saying as far as notifying people that you seem to think the only people that need to be notified are within the planning district, within the overlay. But actually, Hoover Reservoir is huge, and it affects everyone in Genoa Township. I have many friends who kayak on Hoover, who fish there. It even affects the townships around the edges that aren't even within Genoa. I mentioned it to a friend who lives on the other end of Hoover, because 3/4 of Hoover is surrounded by Genoa. What we do is going to even affect the other end of Hoover. And it's not just, a quarry that's been filled in with water. It's actually Columbus's drinking water. It actually has fish in it. And we've been very subject to algae blooms in this whole area here. Alum Creek has a really big problem with it, to the point where people can't swim in August because of algae blooms. And that comes from fertilizer and things like that draining. And the thing that it needs to be recognized here is the denser concrete and asphalt there is near the water, the more runoff is going to happen from the fertilizers in all the yards surrounding the reservoir. And I have a 2.5 acre lot. We do not use weed killer on our lot. And the people who have large lots usually don't bother to use weed killer on their lots or fertilizers. And we need to be promoting the more acres of land we have around the edge, the more the land can filter the weed killers and the fertilizers. And it's not just a matter of who gets more profit from this or that. We're talking about a precedent we're setting for generations to come. And once you have that cement laid and that asphalt laid, and the smaller the lots are, the more likely they're going to be very fertilized and very full of weed killers. And it's not just that. You have runoff for everything. If people do anything with oil, or their cars leaking or anything, it all runs into the drinking water. And personally, I just don't understand why Columbus isn't, even though they're not legally allowed to vote on this, I don't understand why Columbus isn't being notified about this, because what is in that Hoover Reservoir is their drinking water. And we may own the 3/4 of the edge of it, but come on, that's their drinking water. I personally think that many people in relationship to Franklin County should be notified that these are zoning laws that we're talking about that are going to affect their drinking water. and their children's and their children's children's, and the fish. I mean, I wouldn't even eat the fish as they are now, but unfortunately, there are many people who do eat the fish. And, you know, the more pesticides we have running into there, the more dangerous the fish are. So I could go on, but I'm not even really this giant tree hugger or anything. I'm very worried about the future of the water itself. So what I think is, I think there needs to be permanent protection around the watershed area of,
You know, Columbus has protection rights around the entire perimeter. They own the land and they implement their own erosion control and filtration.
right around the edge, like it's just a few yards around, isn't it? So then how can,
That whole
how can,
area east of Sunbury Road to the reservoir, that's all city of Columbus.
so how can we as Genoa decide the density of houses that we want?
It's a good question. That's why we're having this discussion.
Right, so I would not go lower.
Now there's no protection because there is
Right,
no
I agree that there needs to be protection.
Okay, so you're for.
But from a rim, Mr. Anderson
So
said that there's, the city of Columbus has lots of stuff. Mr. Shaver, I believe you said the last meeting that there was notice that was sent.
We had a meeting with
To the
reps,
city of Columbus.
internally, we had a meeting with some of the staff reps from Columbus, yes, a couple months ago.
I guess my
I
final,
would offer this too, that speaking just generally, if it was left to the city of Columbus, the density could be exponentially higher. So I think this is more of a move to look at it in a very general sense. And I appreciate what you're talking about where, as we've already said earlier today, water does run downhill. And we have to be cognizant of that. But I think there's also a view that I think can be reasonable at the end of the day.
so I guess my proposal is have a protection of either a zone or an overlay around the edge of the water, and don't go below 2.5 for homes with septic tanks, and don't go below 1 house per acre for homes with sewer. That amount of land is needed to filter chemicals.
Thank you.
So-
Anyone else? Sure.
Maria Calderon, 4361 Sunbury Road, and I am on the east side of Sunbury Road. And I do own property that goes down to a creek that runs into Hoover. And I believe Columbus owns the 20 feet, only 20 feet of the, I mean, at least their marker is at approximately 20 feet along the edge of that waterway near me. And I applaud everything you said. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm opposed to anything that has any density greater than what you have already mentioned. That's it, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Kevin Henry, 3477 South 03C Highway. I just became aware of this just recently, so I have maybe just a couple of quick comments. One, if anything is being changed from an overlay, I'd recommend that every parcel owner be officially notified of what's being asked. I'm not a fan of social media as a means of getting the word out. You're changing things that may affect their property and their property value. They should be officially notified. Some of the comments have been on both sides, and normally when I see things that are going to enact new rules, they're typically there to fix a problem. I've not heard of any identified problem that you're trying to fix. And I'm against new rules for the sake of new rules. So if someone could give me 2 minutes on what's driving this, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Come on up.
Alfred Burry, 6900 Sunbury Road. I tried reading the document about the restrictions, the new restrictions, and couldn't make heads or tails out of it personally. Is it possible to get a clarification on what properties have no-mow landscaping restrictions, additional restrictions placed on them? There was a lot of verbiage about adjacent to this, adjacent to that, but I really couldn't make any sense out of it. It's my only comment.
Good question. Okay, anyone else? No, you're done.
Jim Carter, 4493 South Old 3C. When you can sign an agreement, conservation agreement or something like that with the city, and you're allowed to put a 5-foot path down, can't be trimmed over more than 8 feet high, and that's what, that's what they say. When I talked to the guy, the watershed manager down there, he said basically they have no control over Genoa Township. So what Mrs. Davis said is like, we really can't do much except for if we can put a sewer in. If a sewer comes in, that can, that helps. And if density is lower, and we increase buffers away from lots that are on Hoover, and we put more buffer or landscape mounds in, things like that, that really allow the water to sit longer. I know we have drainage ponds, and I'm assuming, I don't know the science, that probably helps too, but so what Genoa can do is limit density. And if there is some time in the future that they could actually get sewer to some of these properties on there, that'd be okay. Most of them are so far back and so far away from sewer, that will never happen. But so density really comes down to that. And when in the rules in the PRD, if they're gonna put up mounding and grasses and those known things that will filter the water before it goes into Hoover. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sue Burry, 6900 Sunbury Road. I just wanted to second what the gentleman said about notifying the residents. I mean, I saw this email, I received it on Wednesday, which didn't give me a lot of time. It's like 50 pages to review it before this meeting. But we talked to some of our neighbors and nobody knew anything about it. So of one person I'm 6900 Sunbury Road, so one person in our area that knew something was going on today. So I just wanted to second what the gentleman said. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Teresa Parker, and I live at 8925 Cupstone. And I just want to reiterate what I agree with everything that was said. And I'm really connected to the community. I'm a registered nurse. I'm a beekeeper. I have 6 kids. My husband's an OBGYN. And that 70+% referendum speaks volumes. And I know that the zoning committee has always been very respectful. And I just want to make it known that I didn't know about this, and I found out secondhand, and my neighbors didn't know anything about it. And I think it's so important that we go back to the original zoning numbers that Jim mentioned. This is the best kept secret in Central Ohio. And all the areas around us are blowing up. And it would just be so nice if we could keep things at a low density and protect the drinking water at the same time. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Committee? Anything to add, questions? Sure.
I was sort of wondering, Maria Calderon, 4361 Sunbury Road. I just wanted to know what the general tenor of the topic of the people that contacted you, what was said? What was the overall arching view?
That's a good point. How can we convey all those emails to everybody here that's concerned? Can we post them somewhere where they can access them? Because there's some good points that I think there's worth discussion.
Excellent
I mean,
points in them.
certainly during a records request, I can provide them. I'm hesitant just to post them without having our records people go through them and making sure anything that needs to be redacted, personal information that isn't subject to public record. If I got that kind of request, I usually put it through our fiscal offices, our public records experts. I just wouldn't
Could we do
want to
that? And
accidentally
then
give out information,
could
personal
we
information
redact-
that may have been.
Could we do that and redact the person's name and address and let the comments
Or
be
just
seen?
create an,
I can't say what
general
can and can't be
document.
redacted, that's why I get it to my public
Okay.
records experts in the fiscal office. Sometimes people in their email signatures and email address, they sometimes have information they don't realize in there, and I don't
I
want
get
them
it.
to accidentally get out there if we
I
don't
get it.
have to put it out
Okay,
there.
so we're gonna find a way to try to get that information.
So I will, I just want to make sure we do it by the
Yeah,
book, and I
that's
don't
fine.
accidentally.
We get this in banking regularly. You can do a general document that identifies the common themes. And that's the terminology that would be used, common themes.
I mean, just
And
for the
that way
record, there
there'd be
isn't
no-
hundreds of comments. There's
I
maybe
think we had
dozens.
14 in a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are
Two
some,
dozen,
there's some
but-
good comments, but it didn't like we got flooded with them.
I can off the top of my head summarize some of the major things I can recall. I can't guarantee I'm gonna hit all of them, but I can tell you what. There was concerns, a lot of them were the things mentioned here, concerns about density, concerns about the process, concerns about, repeal, and I can speak to several of these issues. I didn't know which ones the commission wanted to hear about. Definitely concerns about the ongoing development patterns in the community, concerns about, there was desires to bring back some of the numbers from the prior comp plan, concerns about the existing 2.2 number for the PRD. Largely, I think the concerns were about the density and making sure that what we do meets the desires of the residents and the expectations of the residents. So, and I can tell you, that was one of the reasons we even put forward this concept was for the past several years, certainly pretty much as long as I've been here, since 2015, and I'm pretty sure longer, we've been hearing a lot of feedback on these issues, and very similar feedback, and we have made some attempts over time to address some of those, particularly with the major PRD overhaul that we did, but we're always constantly looking at these things, and we felt like maybe this was another step we could take to try to address those concerns. I was charged with drafting this document. I put it together as a starting point and a discussion point, which is why we're here this evening. Candidly, as far as the density numbers are concerned, I put in numbers that I felt like I professionally could feel confident recommending that were defensible. I fully understand there's desires for lower density numbers. I've been in all these meetings, I hear the comments, I hear them, I know them. I just am not to the point where I was comfortable as a professional recommending lower than what I currently have drafted. If I felt.
Yours is just a recommendation.
Yeah.
So we can do what we
Just a
want.
recommendation.
All be all either. So that's why we have commissions and boards of trustees and legal counsel and experts. I'm just one person. I put numbers in there as a starting point of discussion, knowing that we could evaluate it further, and if we feel comfortable going lower, or if I'm presented evidence that makes me feel comfortable, I would recommend lower, but that's the numbers.
Okay, so I'm gonna start since this is my last meeting.
Well, your last meeting in this
Here.
current role.
So I have some heartburn, and one is, I think we are separating the environmental concerns of Hoover with density. And they aren't necessarily related. You can have density and not harm Hoover and vice versa. In fact, I would contend that farms have more adverse impact on Hoover than a PRD. And I say that as an engineer because when we do a planned development, we're required to provide water quality and water quantity that exceeds what a farmer has virtually no regulations controlling his pesticides and herbicides and runoff, sedimentation, erosion. So I'm struggling with that. I also do development all around the country, and I read all kinds of zoning codes, and I don't want to see our zoning code get too cumbersome because my fear is the unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences is If we make it so difficult to develop, reasonable development, then what's going to happen is they're going to annex. I mean, you're going to lose all your land. So you're going to find out that if someone identifies an opportunity to develop and it's become too cumbersome, they're going to find a way to bring sewer and annex. Trust me, I've seen it all over the place. It happens. So we need to be reasonable approach. I love Hoover. Many of my family use Hoover. We kayak in it, we fish in it, we walk our dog, we walk the trails. I don't want to see any adverse impact to Hoover. I'm skeptical that this plan has any impact on Hoover. That's just my honest opinion. I think Columbus has their own rules and regulations that prevent erosion into Hoover Reservoir. You can see the buffers all along Sunbury Road. I can't speak to the entire perimeter of Hoover because I haven't seen the whole entire perimeter. But trust me, if there was an issue, Columbus would be here. I'm talking. So those are my concerns, is the unintended consequences. And the fear, another fear I have is, are we saying that our zoning code is not sufficient enough to prevent pollution? And if it is, then it should be applied to the entire township. To say that because it's not tributary to Hoover Reservoir, that their environmental threats are less than those that are in the tributary, I think is misleading. That's my position.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one comment, and I made it before, and I think that it is fair and open, and we need to be transparent. And I do not agree with the trustees' decision not to mail this notice to each citizen, that it may or may not affect. And I think that would take a lot of the gray area away from individuals who may feel like that they have not been duly communicated to. And that is why I asked my first question earlier, which is what's our process? And I believe, Joe, you did everything that you can to notify individuals through social media, email blast, et cetera. But I think it's also important that when there's perhaps a contentious issue like this, that is hard to understand with qualified people like the chairman and others sitting here, that we give everybody an opportunity to really take a look at it, evaluate it, and then make their own ready and able decision. That's my only comment on it.
Go, before I go. I have the same concern I had before. I have a great problem that there are people that we are assuming social media is going to reach, and it's not. If my mother lived in the township, she would have no idea this was going on right now. Matter of fact, she gives my email address if someone demands it. So I have a grave problem that we are going to be affecting change potentially on people who haven't even been notified, who are our neighbors. And I totally respect what the trustees do, but I have a big problem with this, and I humbly say I do not feel comfortable moving forward without letting the people speak and at least letting them know, especially when we're going to affect them. That's first. Secondly, with all due respect, I understand your discussion with density and environment, and I don't think it's a secret that I'm a real estate agent and I'm very pro-property rights, but in that, I'm also very pro-property rights that we also don't ruin the township by doing things that could be deemed as ruining the township. I'm not going to stand here today and get into the fine line whether 165 is better than 175, which is better than this or better than that, but I think we do need to have large discussions on it because I think we all are concerned with what's taking place, and I do think that density can truly affect both the environment of what we have going on and the blessings that we are afforded here, as well as how the neighbors feel about what's moving in next to them. I do really think that this is something that needs a lot more public discussion, and I think everybody needs to know about it. And I have a grave problem moving forward without it. That's all I have.
do you mind just speaking to that one point about the notification? The board wasn't necessarily opposed to doing the mailers. They just said basically not quite yet. And ideally, we would have used the newsletter from the last cycle, but the timing of when we needed, it was like basically, by the time we had that the board had that discussion, the newsletter was, I think it was basically done.
I think
and
the
it was-
newsletter
it
is a
was-
great
So that's-
venue. I think social media is a great venue, but I also think you need to make sure you're contacting the residents you're affecting.
I think the newsletter goes out to,
And not,
does it not go out to everybody? I don't live here,
no,
so I don't know.
I think it needs to be literally directed to the people that own the property. I'm sorry, that's just my.
I can
one-
bring I can bring that topic back, that feedback back
Please,
to the board. Now, they
'cause I
won't meet
will.
until January, but it will be a new iteration of the board at that point too, so maybe there will be
Well,
different.
that's fine. I have no
directive
problem
at that
speaking
point.
directly to them and voicing my concern.
I have no problems doing that. In fact, I prepped the mailer in case I did get the green light to spend the money. We were gonna be ready to go. I had it all designed, Leslie and I had it all designed and ready to go, so.
I think it's.
I'm not pushing
important-
for this to get
Excuse
done
me.
anytime.
I
Sorry,
think
Mark.
it's important for everyone to know, and this is probably what most people don't know, is this overlay isn't just your property on the border of
No,
Hoover.
it's not.
It encompasses a massive portion. It includes my suburban property and medallions in this overlay district. So it goes again to unintended consequences where we present this code and it gets adopted and a generation from now decides it's not enough, and all of a sudden you're losing property rights to someone that thinks you shouldn't mow your grass.
Right.
Because you've set this thing up for a significant part of the township.
No.
Yes, sir,
Yes.
most certainly
No,
can.
no,
Absolutely.
no,
Most certainly
no.
can.
Stop. You two are talking about changing people's property rights, and we explicitly said it in the first time we talked about it. This changes nobody's property rights. Plain and simple, anybody's property falls in it right now, nothing changes. The only thing this affects is when somebody comes to us and wants to put a PRD in place, and it puts additional restrictions on them.
As
We
proposed.
cannot change, we went through the comp plan, we went through all those zoning resolution, and I know everybody wanted the planning districts and everything else. We can get to a 2.2 number mathematically by looking at the SR RICS and what the minimum square footage requirement is. It gets us to 2.2. So it's an equivalency piece, okay? Everybody in all the other meetings and what we've talked about from a density perspective wanted additional restrictions. That's what this did. We took it out of one of the reviews that we did with the zoning resolution because it didn't fit in what we were trying to accomplish, and we thought we could accomplish it by putting the additional setbacks in place. Joe heard it. We've all talked about it. This is what's coming back up. And we talked about it the last time we brought it up the first time. It changes nobody's property rights as you currently own the property.
I agree.
Okay?
I agree with
We're
that.
all, are we in agreement with that? Because you two are talking like it's changing again.
No,
It's
I'm
not.
just saying it's creating the opportunity for
So,
further changes, because you,
Absolutely.
once you establish the overlay district, I mean, it's just the way nature is.
It is.
okay, but there was an
So-
overlay district before, and it was removed,
We don't think it's an
correct?
overlay
Is that,
district.
was it an overlay, or it was some,
I
it was
don't know.
a
I can't
critical resource, something or
The
other?
critical resource district, I don't know if it was, I'm still a little gray since it was, I mean, literally almost 20 years, probably over 20 years ago since it's been removed. I think it got
Didn't it
removed
go
in like
way back
90s.
90 something?
It basically covered a lot of this area. And I think it essentially, from what I can't speak to the thought process of the why and the rationale and the legal support or the planning support that they had. I know they were working with a consultant at the time. I think the thought was, we'll get rid of the critical resources district, rezone all those properties to rural residential, and then use the comp plan to dictate what densities we were gonna allow where. Under what I know now, or what I've been told, we can't use the comp plan to that legal end. I don't know in 1998 what the prevailing thought on that topic was. It could have been different. I just don't know. I was a middle schooler in Michigan, to be candid with you.
Thanks for that check on our age.
Sorry, I don't mean to like say that, but I wasn't here. And I don't want to say what they did was wrong, because I don't know what facts they were working under And the conditions obviously were radically different back in the late 90s here as opposed to today. So I understand the concern about this puts potentially a framework in to do more down the road. I do want to clarify that like there was a concern about like the low mow area verbiage in here. That only applies to planned developments. If you own a rural residential, suburban residential property, you existing own your home, or even in the PRDs, we're not coming in and telling you how to mow your grass or that you can't mow your grass.
Yeah.
This does not do that. Even if the township wanted to be in the business of mowing, telling you how tall your grass had to be, it wouldn't be something we would do via zoning. It would be something we do through a separate property maintenance code that then the zoning department would probably be asked to enforce. My predecessor tried to put forth a property maintenance code, and it was met with a resounding no way from what I was told. I have no interest in getting in the business telling people how to mow their lawns or how high. Now, the revised code does have a provision about overgrown weeds and
Right,
vegetation, and the
right.
trustees have gotten, we have
Because it
gotten into
becomes
that
a
issue
safety
before,
issue,
but those
right,
are
right,
extreme
yeah.
situations. So on that issue, I just wanted to let people know, the low-mow area is about letting the developers know, hey, if you want, we're not gonna require you to mow all these open spaces you're providing us. We will allow you to do low-mow areas to try to prevent excess gas and help with runoff and provide the areas for the water to get cleaned as it's draining into the water. I mean, the township is trying to do low-mow areas and it's parcels it owns it helps not only with the environment, but it saves frankly on labor costs because we're not out there having people mow grass that just really doesn't have much business being mowed. You got to be strategic about those locations. It's not the right solution for everywhere. I don't want to harp too much on the low mow, but I wanted to make sure no one came out of this meeting thinking that Genoa Township was going to be in the business now of telling you you can't mow your lawn on your property. That's
I would just.
as drafted, that's not what this does.
I would say, I would support as we just do a general, if it's good for the Hoover Reservoir overlay, then it should be the entire township.
Well, we could always go back to the standard PRD regs. Now, that said, I mean, if that's the opinion of the commission and that's how you want to move forward, you'll still have to act on this item and give your recommendation to the trustees, and then they'll obviously review that recommendation, and the board will obviously have to vote on it as well. But since it's a pending public hearing item, we can't just sort of let it die on the vine. Action would at least have to be taken on it. If you do want to receive more public comment, I can get the date in the newsletter. I can revisit the topic of the mailers with the trustees. If we want to build some buffer time, you could even continue. You don't necessarily have to continue this to January. If you do want to continue it, you can continue it to a later date.
Of our
Yes,
group
sir.
here, do all of us as trustees feel that the newsletter in and of itself is an adequate notice to the citizens?
No, I do not.
I mean, I get it and I read it.
I get it and I
That
read it,
being
but I don't think
said,
everybody
it could
does.
be in the newsletter, but then if there's a specific mailing to the applied area.
How many properties are in that, you know, off the top of your head? A couple thousand?
I think the mailing list was just over 2,000.
2,000 something or other.
So here's my, and I disagree with the prosecutor's office on this, but the revised code says that anytime we affect more than 10 parcels,
Yeah.
we have to do a direct mail, or anything under 10 parcels,
No,
we have to do
over
a
10,
direct.
you don't have to do
Yeah, over
anything
10
more
you
than
don't.
advertise.
So.
That's
what-
the statute.
Yeah, so when do we stop, is my point. And that's the point that I asked Joe to follow up with the prosecutor's office is. So the next project that comes along, or next zoning code change or whatever affects 50 parcels. Does that mean that we send out notices to 50 folks? When do we stop? I mean, because.
Possibly, I think it depends on what it is and how significant of a change.
You are opening yourself up to more lawsuits than you can shake a stick at. Because now, instead of following the law, you are unilaterally making a decision based on what standard? You can't verbalize a standard to say, well, in this case, we're going to send notice to everybody, but in that case, we're not going to send notice to everybody. Legal minds can argue about that. I'm not the prosecutor's office that advises the board or the township, but I think we're opening ourselves up to an issue
For
there.
all the reasons on the planet to not do it, that would be the least of my
That would be
concern.
the least of my concern too.
The other comment that I have is, number one, I want to say on behalf of Joe, he's only doing what he's instructed to do by the board. I mean, I've heard comments from the public and from some board members here tonight berating Joe. He doesn't work for us. He works for the 3 trustees that sit here. And he's just been doing what he's been told to do. So if you have an issue, take it up with the Board of Trustees. I mean, he's the conduit, I understand that, but he's only been doing what he's instructed to do by his boss.
Mr. Rusher, I'll speak out to that. I don't think anyone berated Joe.
I
don't
took
think-
it as a berating.
I think he's done nothing but exceptional work since he's been here at the township. And I don't think I would hope he doesn't look at it berating, as he would look at it as bringing forth an idea that was placed on his desk. And now the citizens and this zoning commission are asking very pointed questions. That's not a berating, sir. It wasn't a personal attack on him whatsoever, and no question was a personal attack to him.
I'm not Joe. I took it as a personal attack, but that is irrelevant.
It's not once you made that statement.
Okay, that's fine. Ultimately, in my opinion, this overlay, and no offense to Joe or the Board of Trustees, really doesn't make a hill of beans difference. Because when the Village of Galena or the City of Columbus decides to start
that line
annexing,
in.
this doesn't matter.
Right.
And
That is-
for your information, the Village of Galena is already annexed to the church on Sunbury Road. So, I mean, the distinct possibility of the village either coming south or the City of Columbus coming north, because they're already coming up Harlem Road. At some point in time, those two are gonna meet somewhere on Sunbury Road. And this overlay district, our zoning, all of this is not gonna matter. And so, the other thing that I think we're forgetting about is, until that annexation happens, I don't foresee anybody voluntarily just building a sewer line up Sunbury Road. Maybe I'm wrong. All of this is going to be controlled by the health district and how many acres you have to have for a septic system. Now, I've not verified, but my understanding is you got to have a 2.5 acre lot for a residential property for a septic system. So our density issue is already controlled by the health district until septic comes up, effectively annexation. Do I support this? Yes. Do I think it's going to matter a hill of beans in 5, 10, 15 years? I don't know, because I don't know when Columbus or Galena is going to come, but they're going to come. I've said my piece.
No, I think it's a point well made, but I also think that there are good points that came out of it, but not necessarily everyone is fully understood, and not necessarily is all of them vetted to be agreed upon. And yes, I think we do have to be aware that annexation does happen. We've seen it happen before. It will happen again, and we need to be cognizant of that. But I also think that doesn't mean that you push something through and take a quick vote so that you think you've put something in place.
I'm not suggesting in the least that we take a quick vote. I'm just suggesting that there's a 30,000-foot view here that we've not really discussed. I mean, it's back there. It's there, it's coming. Maybe not in my lifetime, I don't know. But, I mean,
I'm having trouble understanding the quick vote issue. This is something we've been talking about for years.
No, it
And
just
it is,
recently
and this is,
came back.
and this is actually restricting what can currently be done. So how is that shading anybody? How is that hiding something? How is that making a quick vote to do something that's nefarious? How?
When you have residents come forward and they're saying that they didn't hear anything about it and it can affect them, to me, that's a problem.
How is it affecting them?
They,
Directly, how is it affecting? Again, it doesn't change their property rights at all. This is affecting somebody that comes in and buys up a whole bunch of properties, if they can, and tries to put a PRD in place. This is not affecting a single piece of property right on anybody in this room, or anybody on the other side of the reservoir.
Not as it's currently written.
Okay?
Let me
That's my
interject.
concern. It's
I
just,
don't-
if we're gonna do that, then single out the properties that are not already subdivided in a subdivision. I mean, why are you throwing all these residents that are in a subdivision or already a plotted piece of land into this overlay district? I personally am offended that my name is on, my property's on that list. But he has a list, the township has a list of people. in
Well,
this
it's a
overlay.
GIS survey, and it's within a certain,
Well, we might have a
certain
different view
space.
then. I just don't appreciate being on a list.
You fall within a certain number of feet of a,
I would just agree to disagree.
Okay.
I personally am offended by that.
And I would just interject,
Okay.
I don't disagree or agree with any of it, but I think that it is clear based on the 14 emails I read today in preparation for this, that our job as officials of the township and our trustees has not been done in a manner that is full and transparent. And that we probably need to give the affected citizens the ability to take a look at it. And maybe it's going to require us to explain it even differently, to your point, so that they can come to their own conclusion that there isn't going to be any harm, or perhaps not. And then I think at the end of the day, the township has done their job in making sure that they've afforded the ability for all the interested parties, those of us in the district or those of us that are not in the district, to weigh in and give feedback, because ultimately what happens here is of no consequence. It will be happening when the trustees sit and make their decision. I mean, we can provide them feedback. We can provide now feedback. And then the job can be moved forward. But that's just my whole piece is, I asked a question, it was a simple question, I apologize. Should we all agree that, hey, putting it in the newsletter, which is a great deal that's already paid for by all of us sitting here, could be enough, or do we think that maybe we need to send another letter to the affected parties? You know, I don't.
So the feedback, as my understanding, is do the newsletter, assuming I still can get it in, which Leslie's holding it, and she's waiting to hear what the results of tonight were. So I'm assuming that's a yes. And for me to go back to the board at their next meeting and once again ask about the topic of whether they're willing to now expend the money for the mailers. Like I said, they weren't totally anti it. They just weren't quite there yet. So I'm more than happy to bring that topic back to them and see at the next meeting if there's a different opinion
And
on
Joe,
that.
one more comment. Maybe now that they've seen the feedback
Mhm.
through your electronic media, you know, maybe there's a bit of a different view that they might have in their responsibility for transparency in this issue.
And I don't recall the board setting a deadline or trying to rush the commission in any decision. I don't think there was any expectation set by anyone that this was like gonna be settled and voted on tonight by the commission. I knew it was gonna be a discussion. I think the board understands that too. Mr. Chairman, I just had a few things that got brought up during the verbal public comment that I was gonna address if the commission wants me to. Otherwise, I'll
I don't know
just
that's
answer any
gonna
further
affect our
commission.
decision anyway, so I don't see the point in it.
I know I'm just an alternate tonight, but
sorry.
I think for your, Joe, I think for any communication, or at least the one that's gonna go to a lot of folks, is to take the feedback that we got through the emails, the feedback that we got tonight, and almost do like a Q&A. You know, I lived in my house for 20 years at X number of, you know, acres or my lot size. How will this affect me? To your answer, you know, it won't affect you today, you know, and just do a Q&A from the feedback that we've got to make it, you know, in my work life, I used to say, I'm going to explain this in Sesame Street language. And, you know, and I worked at a university, and everybody seemed to appreciate that because they could understand it. That's really all I'm saying, because it is somewhat confusing.
Yeah, I can go back and take a look at the FAQs that I wrote and posted and see, based on the feedback now we've gotten, and have a better sort of idea of some of the additional questions that maybe I didn't cover. I just didn't want to make that document too long, because I know once you get about beyond 2 pages, people start to, and it's a big topic, and it's hard to condense concisely and accurately talk about some of these issues in 2 or 3 sentences and try to cover numerous questions over a period of 2 documents, which is why we have these meetings, too.
And, you know, Leslie's a good resource to help communicate this in a way that people understand. I like the idea of the question and answer, just a real quick
Great
question.
idea.
Am I impacted by this or not? Am I in it or not?
How am I impacted by this? Or, yeah.
Okay, let's move things along. Do you want to continue?
I think we.
Do I have a motion
All
to
right, so
continue?
I continue to, the public hearing for the subject zoning and text and map amendment dated September 2nd, 2021, zoning case 2021-04, commonly known as the Hoover Watershed Overlay District, until
Well, is that going to give you enough time?
next
Right, we go into February.
Because that gives everybody, then they get through the holidays and people can see stuff.
Yeah, if you want me to try to talk to
Try
the
to
board
do
about
February.
additional mailers and stuff, I would highly recommend February at the
So let's go,
earliest.
all right, so our February date is what,
I think it's Valentine's Day, I think.
2/14?
Let me verify that that is the second, indeed the second Monday, but I'm pretty sure. Mr. Welch confirmed. Mr. Welch is telling me I am correct. February, December, January. Yes, correct, yes, the 14th.
All right, commonly, Watershed, until February 14th, 2022, at 7 PM in the Township Hall.
Okay, we got a motion. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Joe?
Roll call, Mr. Moore. Yes. Mr. Leff.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh. Mr. Welch. Mr. Antonin.
Yes. Motion passes.
We'll take a break and let them know. Let's take a break. 5-minute break. You can say it.
There you go.
Bring her here. Break. Time is,
You got off the hook this Valentine's Day.
8:28.
You got off the hook this Valentine's Day.
We're divorced.
Okay, let's call the meeting back to order. The time is 8:33. The next item on the agenda is zoning commission rules of procedure. I'll just start out by saying I did listen to the last meeting, and I think it was Chip had concerns about conflict of interest. Did we get that resolved?
I don't remember how we had yes, it was. I
Or
brought.
shall or should or something?
Yeah,
I thought shall was the,
I didn't write notes in the document.
In that section, I changed all, I think, shoulds and wills to shalls.
Make sure you have at least 2 here to with.
To 4, yes.
Hey, I get paid a lot of money to use those words. You draw pictures. I use fancy
draw
words.
pictures anymore.
I don't know if you have the copy I sent out, but I flagged this, I basically, really, it was all the conflict of interest section. I think that was the only section we even talked about. So I changed, I think there was a sentence in there the commission wanted me to change. Or well, there was a sentence I changed based on the feedback I was getting from the commission, and I guess that's the end of the first paragraph in that section. Possibly, yeah. Basically, making it clear that it's each individual's member to
Do
look into
their-
conflict of interest, and
yeah,
I also,
research their.
I know we talked about, oh, well, make sure you mention that people can talk to the prosecutor's office, and then I went back and looked at the verbiage, and I looked at the first paragraph, and we already had that in there, so.
Anybody else have any concerns, issues with this proposal?
Is there anything that are we allowed to remove people from,
No.
from the public?
The only, I'm sorry, I guess I misunderstood. I thought you meant the.
Are you booting us tonight, too?
Member of audience,
You've been eliminated.
member is confrontational, getting unruly, or there is, one of the applicants' people is doing something we don't. I see nothing in here that allows us to pause, remove, ask to remove. What is our recourse if something gets out of hand and we say enough?
In like,
So,
hostility?
I'm sorry, Mr. Moore, go ahead. Yes.
In New Albany, which is so who cares? There always was a uniformed police officer. Do we have the option to have a uniformed police officer that would be present at our meetings? That would be there at our request, if indeed we had a situation or a circumstance to your.
Yeah, we've had that before.
We've done that before on the meetings that we knew were going to be very contentious and heavily attended. Now, sometimes you get surprised, though, and that did happen to us once, and I think Mr. Antonetz was here for that. Mr. Leff, I think, were you here for that? I can't recall.
Was that when they were saying?
I might have been a member of the public at that moment. I was here for
That
that.
was the first run at actually the half of the project we saw tonight on the first agenda item by EFCON. There is a section on order and safety here at the end that says, the commission chairperson or Genoa Township staff are permitted to ask a person to leave the meeting or request that the Genoa Township Police Department remove any individual from the meeting for failing to abide by the commission's rules, for otherwise disrupting or interfering with the meeting, and/or for unlawful contact, including but not limited to disorderly contact, ORC 2917.11, and/or disrupting a lawful meeting, 2917.12. So the ORC does, I think, permit it. I think Peter Griggs has told me that, yes, you want to be real careful how you do it, and the police may have their own level of comfortability in regards to executing it, but it is your meeting. And it is a public meeting, but, that means the public has the right to attend the meeting and during public comment periods speak,
You're
but
balancing free speech with.
the public doesn't necessarily run the meeting. It's still your meeting, specifically obviously the chair ultimately has the most authority on those matters. We've never had to do that, but could the situation arise? Sure. If the commission wanted to have a uniformed officer at every meeting, I can have those discussions with the police to see if that is a service they can provide. If you want to do it on more of a as-needed basis like we have been doing, we can continue to do that.
Yeah, because that would be a special duty.
There's a lot of meetings, yeah.
That'd be some,
There's a lot of meetings,
So-
they'd be standing there and wondering probably why they're here. 'Cause
Right.
we'd be playing to a room that looks like this.
right.
So there was that piece there, but is there any, there's nothing ruling against us from, hey, we're gonna pause, like we take a recess, we say we're gonna take a 10-minute recess, and then we come back, and if it's not, can we end the meeting at that point? Do we have to have a motion to do something?
meeting.
If we're in the middle of a discussion, say the one tonight for Romanelli, if there were an issue, what is the process at that point?
I mean, usually on a
with this?
continuance, you typically would, I strongly prefer you get the applicant to be agreeable to it.
But we'd have to, we'd have to grade, we couldn't, we can't, we have to finish that meeting.
I don't think so, and especially if you did it under the, I don't want to say that for certain, but that, my initial gut reaction.
So once
I'd
we
always want to
started,
defer to the prosecutor's office on that, but especially if you're doing it for a reason of public safety, I think it'd be hard to say that you were treating,
so once we started a hearing, though, we would have to have some sort of vote at the end of it. It can't be suspended.
Leave the
You can't, we can't leave it open, is that correct?
I'm sorry, so once you have the hearing,
So we opened the hearing.
You've opened the
So
hearing.
let's just, tonight, we did that hearing today for the Grove, okay? And something happened and we paused and we decided at the very end of that pause, we needed to be done for the evening. Do we have to come back and restart, or, come back into session and issue a continuance or anything else? Or is it a suspended meeting at that point?
you would have to take action on
We
whatever.
would have to take action.
Because essentially, you'd leave sort of people hanging as to, well, A, what was the decision, or B, when is the next meeting on this? And if you don't continue to a date, time, place certain, I have to re-advertise everything all over again, and
So, Joe,
everything.
in other
And
words,
the
we
applicant
would
could
just
start
have to do a
arguing that you're
continuance.
messing with their due diligence.
So if we
rights.
wanted to stop it, we would just do a continuance,
Yeah,
correct?
if you really felt like things were getting out of
That's
hand
the
in the
answer.
room,
Okay.
and you needed, I mean, and that's what we had to do. We didn't even, actually, at that meeting I talked about that, we had that situation, we didn't even start the hearing. No, we basically said, we can't have this meeting, it's a safety, it was
Oh.
a safety concern.
Yeah, there were people outside.
'cause they were
That's
just
been a
like-
couple times.
It was like, they were everywhere in the room, and I don't blame them for showing up, but we didn't get a lot of, we knew it was gonna not, we didn't know it was gonna be that well attended. We knew it was gonna be interesting, but we had no sign that it was gonna be like that.
Should have put the tents
In other
up.
words, you thought it was sticks, not the stones.
Because then when we started having meetings where we thought maybe we could have contention, that's when I unilaterally started asking for police officer and sometimes Marshal Cato, because the last thing you want to be worried about is the room occupancy number in this room, right? I mean,
Right.
let Marshal Cato deal with that, because, he can deal with the unhappy people, he does that a lot, enforcing fire code, and he can, and he's the final really authority when it comes to safety matters in that respect, so what he says goes on that front. But I guess, again, to answer your question, I think you could, I would, again, the last resort would be my recommendation, and if we really thought we were in a real bind, we could always try to go to recess, you could ask me to go, you can't go to an exec session, but you could go into recess, and I could try to get the prosecutors on the phone and be like, what do I do?
Okay.
All right, so are we in a position to approve this? Do we have to take any form of action? or-
Well, once you want to put it into place, you're going to need to adopt it. I will say, the prosecutor's office has not reviewed it yet. I did not want to send it to them until you were happy with sort of what you laid out here, and then my thought was we'd send it to them, get any feedback for them before you approved it. You don't have to do that, but that was the path I was looking to go.
Would you feel more comfortable that way?
I
or-
would.
Okay.
A lot of what we have in here is what the BZA did, and they reviewed that, and we worked with them on that. But I've also put a lot of new stuff in here that the BZA, in fact, the BZA is looking to wanting to revise theirs, and they're actually waiting to see what you do with yours, because their chair read this and was like, oh, there's some good stuff in there, maybe we should do it for ours, but they want to see what your final outcome is.
I'm glad you're gonna start reading our names by alphabetical order, too.
I'm really trying to do that.
Okay. You're just gonna start laying us out in alphabetical order?
Oh, well, we didn't do that tonight, I should have, but usually that's how we do it.
I'm fine with the way this thing reads now at this point, so let's keep.
Do you want me to send it to Mark then? You don't even need to make a motion on that, it's not like it's an application or anything.
I mean, I'll definitely review
And if we ever, exactly, you can always change it with,
Hey, are we getting ready to wrap up?
I have one more issue that.
Are you if you want to adopt it, I do think you should put out a motion. If you're telling me just to send it to Mark and then bring that feedback to you before you make the motion, that's fine too, but.
Yeah, I would send it to the prosecutor.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was
Do you wanna
completely
vote on
understanding
that?
my directive.
Do you want to vote on that or just a straw vote?
No, to send it to the prosecutor's
Yeah.
office? No, I
Okay,
don't need to vote on that.
We will when we have to adopt it next month.
Well, yeah, but I didn't know if he wanted to.
Yeah, but I'll send it to him and ask him to do a legal review and let me know if he's got any concerns. I hope he doesn't, because I used a lot of the literature I've gotten at the training sessions over the years to put this together, but
Was there anything interesting on the, did you go to the Saturday?
I did, I was there, yes.
Was there anything of interest that came out of that?
Yeah, there was a lot of good discussion about referendums, the process, the development pressures that are going on the southern end of the county, some of the, apparently there's an interesting case out of Union County where like 6 developers got together and sued a township out there, and it's a really big to-do. I haven't been able to get to the news articles yet because they're all behind a paywall in like the Marysville paper, but I'm trying to look up more detail, because if nothing else, I can share with you, just so you can read it if you're really interested, but I believe so.
That would make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, there was a lot of good discussion, because there's a lot of communities that are, I know we're still dealing with a lot of these density and development issues as evidenced by the discussions tonight, but I mean, there's communities that are us 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that are just now getting into these things, and they're learning a lot. Sometimes I think we take for granted really how much we know and how experienced we are at this.
There's a lot of bruises along the way.
Yes, that's for sure, but,
Do not let them poach you from us.
so, that I think, there's stuff going on elsewhere in the county, like, I don't want to say what we're doing here isn't important. What we do here is very important. The H development here in Genoa is very important. But I mean, there's some, compared to some of the other stuff that's going on in the county, we are doing pretty small stuff. I mean, to be candid and relative, I mean,
Old Taney's already looking for another high school.
yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, it's just like.
We have to ask ourselves a question about, is that okay? Or are we missing out on potential growth? or
I think
not?
some of it's a function of
Not
just the
that
land
I
that's.
support my own statement, but I mean, it is a question for you.
I mean, there isn't much developable land left that isn't really suited just to be residential. We're
Right.
not gonna do a big strip center, State Route 3 is so restricted for access that it really has kind of eliminated any opportunity for that kind of growth that you see.
Yeah, the state's position on 3 really hampers a lot of that. Plus, most of that corridor is even now, there's only really maybe a couple that I would consider truly developable either. The township, aside from Genoa Baptist Church, just tract, the township owns some tracts.
Everything on the east
The rest of it's
side is
either,
trails.
is the trail. Most of it is open space or already sort of subdivided homes. There's, in regards to large pieces of land,
But I think, Sarah, we are just devoid of low to moderate housing here. And, we may not all like or dislike that, but when the banking regulators knock on my door, we have to be very, very cognizant of that element.
the housing issue came up. I mean, I know everyone's already heard about not only the crisis in the inventory number, but also the crisis in terms of the prices. It's great if you own a home and you're making getting all sorts of equity, but Sarah, you probably know as well. You can sell it, but where are you going to go? And are you going to get anything better?
That's what people are saying. And then when they look, and sometimes they're like, so I'm going to sell my house, I'm going to scale down, and then I'm going to tap into my resources to bring $200,000 or $300,000 more, and then like, I'm not sure I should be doing this,
Yeah, I could almost probably
I think an elevator's cheaper.
I bought my house 4 years ago, and I probably almost have 50% of the value I paid for it now in almost equity, but it's like,
Right.
I look
Where
at
do
the
you go?
mortgage affordability calculator, and it's like, well, and then I look at the prices on Realtor.com, and I'm like,
My conscience must speak, the good book says, as in 9, 10, and 11. This too shall come to pass.
Yes.
nothing lasts forever, that's for sure, if we've learned anything.
I have to say this before we wrap up, Congratulations, Mr. Antonis, and
Yes, we'll
thank you
miss
for your
you.
wonderful leadership, and I do mean that.
I'll still get to see him a lot.
You shall.
Once a month, too.
Yeah.
At least.
And I just think you've done a great job in doing this a couple times in a couple different places. I appreciate it. I know everybody else does here too.
Yeah, it is a hard,
Well, I
it
mean,
is hard
it
to share.
might sound cliche, but I'm not a politician. And I'm not doing this, this is not my political career ends at Genoa. So I'm just, it's like the next logical step for me to do
Right.
all I can for my community, and then I'm bowing out, and then Dave can run for I do have one more thing to add. First of all, I appreciate working with all you. You're awesome people. I love the diverse backgrounds of everyone. It's helpful to have these kind of discussions. I do attend zoning meetings, planning commission meetings, council meetings, literally all over the country. And I think Joe does a fantastic job of keeping us reined in. You would be shocked at some of the meetings I go to that are unorganized. They don't even keep minutes. So excuse me, we should be very proud of ourselves the way we conduct our meetings. I did have one thing I wanted to talk to Joe. I did talk to Joe about my experience working with J.C. Manny. Helped me recognize that our system could be a little bit more efficient. She's not a developer, so it took some talking her off the cliff, but to have her go through 3 meetings is really not a good policy. And I think part of it, and Joe and I both agreed, is I think what will be helpful, and I'll do what I can as a trustee to help this process along, because it's not fair to us either, to have to sit through these meetings and talk about that they didn't dot the I on page 2 and they didn't cross the T on page 4. All of that stuff can be resolved between Joe and the applicant. So in essence, they come in here and the only thing we should really be discussing is divergences, right? If everything else meets code, there is no reason to beat these things to death. And I use this as an example of the extreme, but in some ways it's very good. Some ways it's not. But I've done development in Gahanna. And in Gahanna, you submit your application and they don't even schedule it to be heard until the applicant and the staff agree on all the items. So it actually is kind of a blessing because it pushes you as the applicant to get stuff resolved because you know you're not going to get on the agenda until you get stuff resolved. And my thought is that Joe's coming in here with a lot of issues that can be resolved prior to bringing it to the commission. If we have to make it a 60-day review to give Joe and his staff more time to review because they don't have enough time, I think you're doing a disservice to the applicant to keep bringing them back here and we talk about the errors and omissions in their application and not the zoning issues.
Yeah.
So I would task you, I'm not going to be here, with coming up with a way where, you know, this, and it means that this stuff, material that we receive will be half the size, right? Because he's just going to talk about the issues that can't get resolved between Joe and the applicant. My thought, that's my thought.
We've seen a phenomenal amount in the last year when a tech review has between 20 and 30 items on it. So I don't want to sit there and read and approve it.
Well,
and
I
send it back.
sometimes feel
So how
sorry
do
for
we-
you,
How do we
Joe.
do that? I mean, are we required right now, the minute somebody applies, that we put it on the schedule at that point?
Yeah.
So
What is the time limit,
Joe,
Joe?
what
Between
are
an
we allowed to
application,
do with
pretty
that?
much 30 days, they submit, they can be heard.
Paul, do you have
Is that
the flash drive?
No.
Our rule.
For this?
And
Oh, you don't have
You gotta
that.
make it 45 or 60
Um,
days.
Is it in the,
I have it on a flash drive that I bring when I run these things. I'm trying to, I know regional planning has it on their website.
I mean, are we allowed to set that rule, or is it an ORC?
Well, it depends on, if you're talking about a rezoning, the ORC is going to largely dictate your time frame.
Okay.
Now, what you do have control over is how much information you're asking at rezone. Because some of those comments are somewhat driven by the fact that we ask for a lot of information in detail relative to rezone. Now, as Mark and I were talking about today, you sort of get in a rock and a hard place because you don't ask for enough information, you're gonna have a lot of people feeling like there's not enough information, and how can you vote on this without knowing X, Y, and Z? But to the same degree, you know it's a two-step process, and that you're gonna get another bite at the apple, and there's a whole bunch of other agencies that are looking at all this stuff, and and I think that's some of the education component, and it's hard because, we can try to teach and teach and teach, but usually most people aren't gonna look into this stuff until it's affecting them in their backyard kind of thing.
I guess the part I don't understand when an application comes in, because I sit on the Ohio Board of Building Appeals, and we don't do all of this. I mean, you come in and you either ask for a variance to an adjudication, and that's it. I mean, we're not designing your project for you. And I feel like at times we sit here on the fly, all of us, Joe included, and the applicant.
Because we're all trying to help get it done.
Right, and we're designing a project on the fly, and I think about the Groves tonight. Last month we were talking about the lighting because the lighting issue wasn't resolved. Why isn't that resolved? Why is that not coming to us already resolved? Like you said, I think we should only be dealing with, does this need a divergence? And voting up or down on the divergences, and then that's it. I mean, voting up or down on the project.
On the project.
On the project.
This is a question, because when I first came on the board, this was my question. Why don't we have a comprehensive application? And I think the thing that I got, and Joe, I may be wrong, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, you did not feel that you were comfortable or had the authority to tell an applicant, no, you can't do this. No, it's not going to go further from my desk until you do this, that, and the other, because the ideology that you conveyed to me, if I'm not hearing it correctly, please correct me, was that that's our job to be able to do that. And so that's when I kind of laid off it, because in other zoning commissions I've been involved in, I mean, do not pass go, do not collect $200 was the rule. Here's our rules. We spend a lot of time putting them together. You've got a lot of abilities outside of our council, and yours for that matter, to do that. But why are you going to send a package in and we're going to talk about, is it red birch or white birch? Which was my example I think I used with you. But is that something that you feel comfortable in doing?
I can tell
or
you,
confident or not?
Even at regional planning, some of the members have had this discussion about at what point do you absolutely have to let an application through the door regardless of what you feel about the quality of the submission?
Right.
And I think there was actually I think Berkshire dealt with this issue, and actually, I think it was related to the outlet project possibly, where one of the developers went after them, and even though I don't think they actually even rejected the application, they just said, hey, we think this, if this is what you want to submit, this doesn't meet usually what we expect and standard. And the applicant took that as a rejection and then accused Berkshire of, I guess I shouldn't use, that was the hearsay story I heard. So I have never verified that, but I do think there's some legal concerns, particularly with the rezonings. The administrative hearings, I think, are a different animal. I think you have a lot more control over that. But with the rezonings, what is the standard to at least get in the door? Is it essentially pay the fee, submit a napkin sketch, and that's good? I think, to me, and a lot of this is just because the revised code isn't clear, and the case law hasn't totally addressed all of this stuff, and no one wants to be the case that goes to court to figure it out.
How do we help you?
I would have to talk, I would want to know, this is what we want to do. These are our ideas, or these are our questions, and then I would have to take them to the prosecutor's office. Can we do this? What are your concerns?
Remember, Joe, when we were talking about what do we consider to be a completed application? That was my term. Again, a banking term, but
And I think, to me, the simplified answer to that is, it has met all of the technical requirements. Meaning your tech review is basically non-existent because all of those issues have been addressed.
See, I think my gut reaction to that is, especially in a rezone, that would be a too high of a hurdle to allow it on a agenda. Theoretically, my impression out of all the seminars I've gone to over the years and Don Brocious, may he rest in peace, I think used to speak about this issue. I think in my analysis for rezoning, based on what I've heard, if they pay the fee, tell you where the property is, tell you how big of the property is, tell you the name of the property owner, tell you what the zoning district is and what zoning district they want, that's all they have to do. Because that's all you have to advertise. They don't have to give you a development plan. They don't have to figure out sanitary and sewer connection. They are just saying, I want to go from this zoning designation to this zoning designation. Mark, you do this all the time. Do you get that vibe from some of the, I don't know what other communities.
Definitely. And actually, Delaware County is one of the most difficult ones. And this is more, I was involved in a rezone that required a replat.
Oh, those are real
If you've
fun.
seen a plat, it has everybody in the county signs it, engineer, sanitary engineer, health department, county commissioners, township trustees. And they wouldn't even approve it until the engineer approved the construction drawings. So we go to a meeting with the county commissioners and beg the question is, so you're saying is if a farmer or in this case, a developer owns 10 acres and he wants to split out 5 acres and sell it for an office development, they have to show you this whole office, how it's going to work in there, and their answer is yes. So you're going to spend full CD level drawings just to get it replatted and zoned. And this is the reason why. Because historically, they kept having is developers would come in, chop up a piece of property, rezone it, and then if someone buys it and finds out they can't do what they want on it.
Tear it off, yeah.
Because they can't fit it, or the utilities didn't get there, or whatever. So they make you do all this full CD levels to do, like you said, is to support your position that I want to rezone this, and this is why it can safely be rezoned. It wasn't to protect the applicant, it was to protect the potential buyer.
May I raise my hand one more time? And I just, now you're into my world a little bit. Many of these large projects require, let's just say, maybe out of back pocket funding.
Mhm.
We're not giving you any dollars until all that's done.
Yeah.
Because we can't, especially if it's a publicly held, you just can't do that.
Well, and the developers, a lot of times, are hesitant to put a lot of money into the preliminary design work. Mark, as you know, it's not cheap.
Yeah.
We generally would approve a
and
loan with
they-
the use, and if the use changed, to your point, then that's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah. So we're doing a PRD on Buckeye Lake,
Mm-hmm.
50 acre. You guys think he's got density here. It's like 4.8. But there, in this township, there's one review for a rezone. It doesn't even go through a sketch, preliminary final. And they're actually trying to change the code because people aren't going to spend 6 figures to find out if it will be rezoned. You go to a zoning hearing and they could turn you down, and you've spent 6 figures doing environmental studies, surveys, all this investment to find out that they don't want it zoned. But
And that's some of
their
the-
process. It's straight final. It'd be like someone coming in here right now, proving to us that this rezone is worthy.
And even though the timing of the two-step process is somewhat of an annoyance, I think to the applicant sometimes, it does prevent that scenario where they put in substantial amount of money in a one-step process to just hear, no, we're not even interested in rezoning this, and they've spent all that money on all that engineering and site development prep.
So back to my original concern, and this was just based on one of the times, we got Joe's review. There's 2 concerns. So we got Joe's review, and I quickly as I could addressed all his concerns and rewrote the development text, redid the drawings, got them back to Joe prior to the meeting. So the challenge with Joe is, and I've seen this before, is dumping it on us, and we've had that happen, right? Where he gives it to the developer, and the developer comes in and says, oh, here's how I addressed all the issues. And matter of fact, we even continued a meeting, and I said, look, this is too much. I'm not going to sit
Yeah,
here
we've
and
done that
evaluate
numerous
your
times.
application with 35 technical issues on it, so we're gonna continue this. But, so my point is, we felt like we addressed your concerns and they should have gone away when we attended the next meeting. But instead, she's coming to the meeting and you're repeating all the stuff that we felt like we addressed. And that's where the system needs to be, something needs to be done, whether you need staff. If it's still gonna be 30 days, then you have to be able to give them ample time to address it, submit it to you, you're comfortable with it, and then you bring it to us. But, so that 1 second meeting for J.C. Manning was a complete waste, not a complete waste, I'm sorry. It could have been much more efficient, probably couldn't even got approved, because you were presenting to the commission issues that we had addressed. But you didn't have ample time to give it to the commission, prepare it and give it to the commission, and that's where the log jam.
Did that cost them money?
I can't answer that.
But you get my point.
Yeah, I can't answer that. I don't know. I think she already bought the land, so it's not as though she was carrying money.
And Mark highlights really the challenge my office has. And some of it has to do, I think, with maybe, and Ms. Walsh, you asked about sort of what could you do to help me? Absent of changing stuff in the code to just totally formalize a new process or revised process, getting at least directive of what are the commission's expectations in those types of scenarios when I have an applicant that at the week before or a couple days before tells me, hey, I want to show this, and then we made all these changes. And to Mark's point, yeah, that's exactly happened before. And I brought in, I always tell, here's what I tell them, generally. You can do this. Just know this sometime, you think you're fixing all your problems, and you may be. But also know this can backfire on you because they're going to get it. If I send this out on Wednesday or Thursday and the meeting's on Monday, they're going to get it and then tell me, why are we just getting this? I spent all the time to review this. I'm going to be gone all this weekend. I don't have time to look over all this stuff. And then they come on Monday and they're angry. And then I said, now you got an angry commission with you. So I always advise the applicant, it's a strategic decision for you what risk you want to take. I can't tell you on that front what to do. I also sometimes tell them when I know I see a lot of comments, and I know this, I never tell them what you're going to do, but I have a good feeling of when I think this might get continued because there's a lot here. I always tell them, I will tell them, not always, I shouldn't say always, but I generally try to tell the applicants when they're in that situation, there's a lot here. I'm not sure you're going to get through this meeting with a vote. Your options are ask for a continuance to another meeting so you can take some more time to clean it up and for me to get it in the hands of the commission, and then they have time to do another review, kicks everything back 30 days admittedly. But then maybe you only have to go to one meeting and maybe you can get out a one-shot deal and not have to worry about upsetting them. I said in the alternative though, I've also seen scenarios where people have done that, and then in addition to my comments, the commission has questions or comments or concerns, or the public has comments or concerns, and then the applicant's saying, well, I wish I would have gone to that first meeting, I wouldn't have continued, because now I'm gonna get continued anyway. Had I gone to that first meeting, I would have heard that 30 days ago, and I would have been able to address that, so I would have ended up in the same spot. So I don't know if we ever can 100% fix that scenario, but I think that's the challenge for me is I just need to know generally how does the commission want to tell applicants, because I can only speak for tell them what you tell me to tell them. In scenarios like that where either the applicant has a lot of comments and I'm not sure it's gonna be something that the commission's gonna love voting on, or they make a lot of changes, what do you want me to tell the applicant in regards to what the commission's general position and policy on those situations are? And sometimes it's a case-by-case basis, and I know that's the case, but as a general matter, I would at least like to know how the commission generally feels about those topics, so I know how to.
I mean, you bring up a valid point, and I still stand by the benchmark of if there's any technical issues, they need to be resolved before they come here. But you bring up the point about, well, an applicant goes, we bring up something that maybe Joe didn't touch on or whatever. would it be possible to, applicant submits, you do your tech review, we get a preliminary review at a meeting so that we're doing it in sunshine, and then the applicant comes in, so we're talking about a 60-day window where you give us the 5-minute spiel about this is the project, here it is, blah, blah, blah. And then they come in for their presentation and vote at the following meeting so that, and I would say probably the engineers more than anybody here, have their input and can flag any issues that the applicant can then address before they come in for a vote. Kind of expanding our process.
Well, we sort of did that with her, actually. I mean,
Well, we did it because we had 3 hearings on it. I
well,
mean,
no, but she came in early and talked about it, and we gave some initial feedback.
Yeah.
As well. It wasn't formal, it was very informal, and then it went a couple months away, and then
We had a lot of
we had
comments too.
But there was a lot of stuff there because of the smallness of that lot. I mean, that was very specific because of the size and the setbacks, and we had all of our setback requirements that now we had to figure out if the divergent, I mean, there was a lot there.
I agree, but it still comes down to the scheduling it, because we get the technical review, maybe 10 days before the meeting.
I shoot for a week. I know I don't always hit that, but I usually try to get it to you a week in advance.
But you're
And the
talking about
applicant.
is, instead of just reviewing it, is you set the next meeting to discuss it, and then you have the hearing with the applicant.
Right.
The rub with the rezoning is I just don't think I can do that and meet the statute. Because once someone applies for rezoning, I have 5 days to get it to, I have to get it to regional planning, and I think you have to have your hearing within 30 days. Regardless of the quality of the submission. If they have met the bare minimum to get on your agenda,
They get in.
I can't stop anyone from getting on your agenda. I tell, in public, it's mad, like, how could this even get on the agenda? I can't control it.
So
I
in
can't.
order for you to do a review, though, does something have to already be in place for you to do a full review of something? They have to pay a fee, they have to submit.
They have to submit the application, pay the fee, and give me the materials.
But if they didn't do an application at that point, and had you review where we're at, is there anything limiting that exposure?
My concern with that is, I'm going to get a lot of half-baked, I will get buried in prospective
Is there a,
fishing expeditions, for lack of a better
is
term.
there a fee requirement that then could be
We could do like
attributed to the submission?
We could do a sketch plan. I get a little leery of starting to apply fiscal dollars to different things. That I think I'd have to bring the fiscal office in to see if that's even something they could do or we could be comfortable with. I don't want to make it too convoluted.
I don't know the statute, but if the statute says you have to have a hearing within 30 days, that doesn't mean you have to have a vote within 30 days.
Absolutely correct.
Right.
So we could say, you can come for a hearing, but we're not going to vote on this until there's no technical issues.
Well, and that's, I think, what we've been doing.
That's what we've been doing. I mean,
Well,
is there anything, is there anything in the last 5 years that's been submitted that we did in 30, that we approved in the first one? I don't think there's a single one.
Oh, yeah, there's been, well, not rezones, no. But
Not
we-
rezonings,
we
no.
we've approved development plan amendments, like the
Yes.
brewery and some of those.
The brewery.
Okay, but they already had something, it was a final development plan.
The villas at Tussock, when they took the house down, I
Yeah,
think that was
yeah.
one meeting.
Yes.
But a rezone, no, I don't think.
Not a rezoning and not not a preliminary development plan.
I think if
I don't
you
think
get your
we've done any of
factors of
those.
production up front and you have a stronger or enforceable application/checklist.
See,
that
that's,
give you the authority to say, look, this is not complete and you're not gonna go to hearing until it's complete because we're not wasting.
I don't think I can,
commission's time.
I don't think I can be given that authority.
I'd have to
I
call
don't,
the chair.
why?
Because the chair can say, we're not gonna review.
It's
this
your
much
meeting. I
material.
have no, I am just the paper pusher. I mean, to put it bluntly. I do the reviews, but I mean,
I like how you deflect.
I don't,
decisions,
yeah, look,
Or-
I don't agree with that statement. We spent
That's an
hours
oversimplification,
and
but-
days writing a process and a procedure here. I mean, I sat here, as we all did, till 10, 11 o'clock at night, listening to the color of trees. And, you know, I don't buy into that. I think that we have to marry ourselves to here's our process, here's the checklist, you're a citizen. It's open, free, and clear communication. This is what we do. And if you expect to have an application reviewed, then you need to have a completed application. And why would we, I mean, this is just commonplace.
But you're saying the
But
statute.
you feel like you don't
I
have
think
the
that sort of
authority-
undermines the whole reason for the zoning commission to exist. If I'm just doing all the work, I mean, no offense, you're just sort of voting on it.
That sounds like a swell idea.
You're not hearing me. It's the points of incompleteness, technical incompleteness.
Well, let me say, having been on the other side of that, there's a huge incentive for that applicant to make sure it's thorough and he gets heard. Because if they have money tied up, they don't want to lose another month.
Right.
Because they've submitted a bad application. He probably fires consultant. So there's, you know, they don't want to come in here
No.
and get.
I'm trying to give you more authority.
It either. I mean, frankly, doesn't help me out at all.
And we tell people all the time, is our goal is to give the board a clean copy. I don't want to sit here and
that's right.
read 8 million things. And
I think it also comes down to the fact, there's nothing in the revised code that says I have to do these reviews, and there's nothing other than that's the expectation we have, and that's a very common practice. But the revised code says nothing about, it's the zoning inspector's job to review rezoning applications, and report their findings to the commission. Nothing in there, as far as I recall. It's your meeting. I don't even, again, I'm told to be here, so I'm here, and I think it's a good idea, and I think we do it the right way, but I think we need to remember that, because that's how the statute functions, and this is your meeting. And that's why I always defer to you on these policy decisions, and particularly, and that's why we defer so much power to the chair. Because it's really it's the chair's decision at the end of the day, what's on the agenda, what the order of the agenda is, and how the meeting's gonna proceed, just like Mark does that. And, I mean, you guys, the rest of you don't see it, but I email Mark relatively frequently about procedural matters and agenda, you know, even tonight, which item was gonna be first on the agenda, I had to ask Mark. I don't make that decision, that's Mark's decision. Unless he tells me, I don't care, Joe, you do what you want, but it's a zoning commission meeting. I can't be involved with how you operate your meetings and the decisions you make. I can, as Paul Wise always says, my job is just to recommend the hell out of things. Provide you information and recommend the hell out of things. Pardon my French. But beyond that, it's your meeting.
Makes sense.
And you have to review the applications, look at my comments, and determine how you feel about them, what you want to do with that application. I don't mind examining this issue. I'm not sure we're going to be able to take it ideally as far as some of the ideas I've heard thrown out, but that doesn't mean we can't improve somewhere along the line. So I'm very willing to think about what can we do. But if there's specific items, I need it like almost specifically written down so I can send Mark exactly. Because I don't like sometimes trying to transcribe these conversations and then ask him or try to summarize it, because sometimes things get lost in translation. And maybe how I heard it isn't exactly how you said it. So sometimes if you can write it down or say, okay, ask the following question, then I can provide it to him. And this was the question I was told that. Because really that's how it's supposed to work anyway. Again, the council really works for you. They don't work for me, they work for you.
Well, so J.C. Manny's frustration was simply, we got the review, and I can't remember whether we literally got it back, all the questions revised and issues addressed and back to you the next day, or we got it back to you the day you said you needed to have it back. And then when she comes to the meeting, you're reading all of the issues that we addressed. And so she's sitting there, you know, thinking, well, wait a minute, we fixed that, we addressed that. So you were literally touching on all these 12, 15 things that we resolved. And I'm not pointing to you because you're.
No, it's an example, I know.
Yeah, it's just the time frame doesn't allow you to be able to come to the committee and say, it's not these 20 issues because 15 of them are resolved, it's these 5. And then that hearing is going to last 10 minutes, not an hour and a half. That's the nut of all this.
I mean, I can certainly shoot to try to get the reviews done sooner. It's hard because I have a 30-day window and you start factoring in vacations and parties I can't control that I have to reach out to in regards to trying to get feedback. That's sometimes why they take as long as they do, because it's just, I have BZA cases, I have the continued hearings, I know it's my job to figure that all out and juggle it and try to be fair to the applicant, but I think that's a little bit of but I mean, certainly if the board, if the trustees set that is the expectation, I have to, it's my job, as we pointed out earlier, to do what the board tells me and meet the expectations, so.
You haven't read your new job description.
Yeah, I guess not.
What if we established a policy that the initial hearing is a review hearing and not necessarily a vote unless the application is complete in the eyes of the board, the commission, and we decide to vote on it?
I still think you're gonna have a hard time saying, I mean, you could set that as your standard. Just know that if the applicant wants a vote. Yeah. And they ask for it,
Yeah,
they're close to entitled. I don't wanna say they're 100% entitled.
yeah, they are entitled to a vote.
But they can say, we don't care. Yeah. This is, we're not making any changes. We want you to vote on what we've just submitted to you.
Well, that's what the church did. I mean, ultimately, they said,
Yes.
to heck with
yeah,
it.
we saw that. And then the risk is on them, knowing that.
To your point though, Chip, you could say, that's great, we'll do that. This isn't a complete application, and we will vote today and just because we don't have enough data that's complete to be able to make a cogent decision.
And then the board of trustees is gonna end up designing their project for them. I mean,
All the time.
That was more of a risk
Bump
for
it
the
up to a minute.
applicant when the law was, it took a unanimous vote of the board to overturn a recommendation of the trustees. That law was changed by the legislature several years ago to say it only takes a majority vote of the trustees. I do also know in this scenario of a split vote, it's possible at the board level, say it's a 2-member board and the vote is split, it may defer back to the recommendation of the commission as the final say. I don't know that for certain, but I think that's sort of, might be generally, I mean, all is fact specific, but. Sounds reasonable. Yeah, so it does, so they shouldn't sit here and just think your vote, your recommendation means no hill of beans, I'll just roll with the trustees. There is some risk there. They do need to take your recommendation seriously. I mean, the board takes it seriously. They consider your input. And the applicant should take it seriously and not just think, oh, well, I'll just clear this hurdle and then get a yes from the board. So,
Got a motion?
yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to drag this on longer than we need to. So,
motion, sir?
Sarah, you making a motion?
Are you making a motion?
Kinda.
so is there any, aside from just
That was a
noodling on
50
the
minute,
issue,
like-
is there any specific questions or research you want me to do?
I'll leave it up to you guys.
And to Chip's point, come in and we want it all done.
And,
We want it all done.
oh, trust me, that's, in my perfect world, that'd be the scenario too.
I think, maybe if I'm, correct me if I'm miswording this, but I think the substantive question for Mr. Fowler is, at what point, what is the applicant's right to come before the board for a vote or a hearing? And at what point, or what restrictions can the zoning commission place on an applicant coming before the board for a vote, or the commission for a vote? I don't know if that's.
I don't know. I think we have the ability to do that. I mean, I have done it as a chairman, and I think you were one with me where the comments were so cumbersome that I
It
just
was
said,
terrible.
we're
Like,
not
yeah,
going
this-
to hear this right now. We're not going to debate all these issues.
Right, but I mean, I guess as a policy, what, can we set a policy, and if so, what should that policy be that says, you're not even having to make the decision?
Right.
I mean,
Because.
if you want, I can even see if Mark can come in here and is willing to have some of these conversations in person.
Say that again,
Yeah.
Chip.
These are the 7 minimum things that must be here so that you can have a decision.
I was just saying, I can always reach out to the prosecutor's office and see if they're even willing to come in person and just have a discussion like this, because, then I'm not playing.
That's fine.
Sometimes, when you're talking to them, they have to be cautious. but-
I think it would be, and maybe I'm just a data person, but I think it would be interesting to see if we go back the last 36 months maybe, or 48 months, how many, like with J.C. Manning, it was 3 meetings, right? And how many are, I mean, we don't have many that are 1. We usually have them that they are 2, right? And then see how many they are that are actually 3. I don't know if you can just do a quick,
Oh, yeah, that's easy
Excel
enough.
spreadsheet, because honestly, maybe we're laboring, I mean, I think it's a great idea, but if we are constricted by ORC, right? If we're constricted by ORC, we may be sitting here tonight, I hate to say making a mountain out of a molehill, because it may not be within the confines of what we can do to really give substantive change to achieve something different of get 3 meetings to 2 meetings.
That's my concern. I just want to tell you we can do something
That
if
we
the
can't.
revised code just
That we
says,
can't.
you got to open the hearing within 30 days.
You said you want the Gehannas, right? You said that they're the ones that do that.
But they're under a different statute, completely different statute.
Because they're a city and we're a township.
Cities can do anything essentially they want unless there's a law that says they can't. Townships cannot do absolutely anything unless there's almost a specific law that says they can't. I mean, that's the very basic Sesame Street version of how the law works.
It is.
So, that's just what we have to keep in mind when we look at like Westerville and Gehanna, is they're playing a different they're playing an entirely different game, really.
Mhm.
That's the benefits of home rule.
We beat that enough?
All right, I'll reach out
Quite
to Mr.
dead.
Fowler with that question. I'm sorry, what was
I
that?
said that horse isn't quite dead yet.
It's still right. It's not a beast yet. But it's still there.
All right, do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Sarah. All in favor?
Aye.
Time is 9:25.